Spring camp is just around the corner, and it's that time of the year for me to give you guys my pre-spring power rankings. I'm going to be doing this for every conference, and I figured why not start off with the best conference in college football, that being the SEC. We're going to go from best to worst, 16 to number 1. We got to start off with, you guys already know who has to be first on here, man. Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt didn't even have a stadium that was finished last season. I mean, they were playing with the stadium that was under construction. And it was really awful to watch Vanderbilt football anytime they played at home and pretty much anytime they took the field. And going into this season, you know, Clark Lee showed a little bit of promise the season before last when they won 5 games, and you would have thought that they would have been a program that was on the rise. But last season, they only won 2 games, and you already know with conference realignment, things aren't going to get any easier for the Commodores, and they just have to start out at 16. I mean, yeah, they hit the transfer portal. They got a quarterback from New Mexico State who had 35 total touchdowns last year, but they're just a team that every single position for them is a huge problem. Offensive line, they got a little bit of talent at receiver. Defense has some major concerns. Vanderbilt, they're the worst team in the SEC right now going into spring camp. Mississippi State, Jeff Lebby has his work cut out for him. He is somebody who has a team that's only returning 41% of their production from last season, which is last in the SEC. And then you didn't really do that good of a job in the transfer portal, but that can always improve. It's just overall, Mississippi State isn't giving Jeff Lebby a lot to work with in his first season. And right now, just going into camp, you're most likely going to have to wait until the transfer portal opens back up and you can continue to build your team up that way, because quarterback right now doesn't look good. They're either going to be starting Mike Wright or Blake Shapen, who is coming from Baylor. And wide receiver, that's a little decent, but your offensive line is Your defensive line had a lot of vets last season. They're going to be out the door. So it's just a lot that Jeff Lebby's going to have to replace, mostly through the portal. And they just don't have that good of a team, but they're not as bad as what Vanderbilt is. At 14, Arkansas, Sam Pittman's in a really big season or a really big year. You know, if he can't start out fast the first 5 games, it could be wraps for him. Their quarterback situation isn't that great. And they did bring in Bobby Petrino to be their offensive coordinator. He did a pretty decent job at Texas A&M last year. They're losing a good amount of talent on defense, but they do have pass catchers that are experienced. And you get Trent Green, who he was starting at Boise State last year. He's more of a project quarterback. If Bobby Petrino can do a little bit of magic with him, he becomes a little bit of a more efficient passer. He could be a little bit of an underrated pickup for Arkansas, but he's more so one of those project players that you're just hoping can put it all together. And he wasn't that consistent in the Mountain West. So we'll see how consistent he's going to be. And the SEC, a step up in competition if he even wins the starting job. South Carolina, I'm never going to count out the Beamer boys, but is that offensive line going to be fixed? And yeah, they did hit the transfer portal pretty hard. They brought in a lot of transfer offensive linemen, but I mean, the offensive line has been terrible for the last couple of seasons, and every offseason people try to get a little bit optimistic about the offensive line being decent, but you can't even get decent. So their offensive line just is one of those things that I got to see it to believe it when the season kicks off. I don't care how good they look in spring camp. I don't care how many good things get said about them in fall camp. I got to see it on the field. Now, quarterback, all right, you don't know who's really going to be replacing Spencer Rattler, but they have options. All right, you have Lenore Sellers, somebody who Gamecock fans are really big fans of. You got Robbie Ashford, So there, I think that at quarterback, South Carolina isn't too bad off, but at defense, you have a lot of experience coming back. So defensively, you should be good, but we don't know how good the quarterback play is going to be. We don't know if that offensive line is going to be improved. And it doesn't matter who's going to be at running back if the big boys up front can't block for him. Billy Napier, we know that he has the hottest seat in the country right now at Florida. They have a decent team. You know, I don't think they're a team that's completely lacking talent. It's just that they have a lot of unproven talent. And going into this spring, it's going to be key making sure that those young guys who are going to be getting their number called a lot this season get a lot of meaningful snaps. But, you know, you don't really have a lot that you can look at right now as a proven guarantee on any side of the football. Defense, you do feel pretty confident about how good your secondary is going to be, especially with Jason Marshall coming back. But, you know, the defensive line, need to see more out of it. And just overall, the defense. Does it piss you off how much you pay for your monthly phone bill? Why are you getting frustrated when our partner Mint Mobile has plans as low as $15 a month that give you unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network? Stop getting frustrated with how much you spend on your monthly phone bill and go to trymintmobile.com/JT Sports in description and pin comment down below to get access to premium wireless for only $15 a month. That's only $15 a month. Switching to Mint is easy. It only takes 15 minutes to do. If you're pissed off with how much you pay for your monthly phone bill, switch to Mint Mobile today and go to trymintmobile.com/JT Sports in description and pin comment down below to get premium wireless for only $15 a month. Stop getting upset with how much you spend on your monthly phone bill and switch to Mint Mobile today. This needs to take a big step up because last year one under their new defensive coordinator, Austin Armstrong, it didn't look pretty. And offensively, that offensive line needs to look better. And who's going to be the dude behind Montrell Johnson? So Florida has some talent, but it's a lot of unproven talent. At 11, Kentucky, for me, they're just one of those teams that, you know, they're going to be decent. They're not going to be bad, but are they actually going to be threat in this conference this year to compete for the conference title? You bring in Brock Vandagriff, who was the ninth-ranked transfer portal according to 247 Sports, and he probably should win the job, but you lost offensive coordinator Lane Cohn, who now is the OC for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you replace him with the OC for Boise State. You give him a 3-year deal, but Boise State's offense wasn't anything that was all that special. And it doesn't really change anything about Kentucky's offense that we haven't seen out of them the last couple of years. If you can get better quarterback play than what you got out of Devin Leary, which was a big disappointment, this is a team that could finish in the top 5 of the conference because they do have an underrated group of wide receivers. You got Brown and Dane Key. Your offensive line should take a big step up. This should be the best offensive line play they've had in the last 2-3 years. The offensive line play has drastically dropped off. Defensively, your defensive line has a ton of experience and a lot of talent. This should be one of the best, if not the best defensive line in the Southeastern Conference this year, even better than Georgia or Texas. So Kentucky at 11, they come in there for me. I can't rank them any higher than this because they still have a big unknown at quarterback, and we don't know how good their new offensive coordinator is going to be. Auburn is starting out my top 10. And many of you guys probably going to disagree with me having the Tigers and Hugh Freeze this high, but they do return a lot of production from last season, 65%, which puts them in the top 50 of college football. They do have to replace 4 starters in the secondary on defense. But other than that, you have some vets on that side of the ball. Offensively, you're still trying to build up your offensive talent. But Hugh Freeze is one of the better offensive-minded coaches in the nation. So he should still be able to scheme some stuff up. It's just, you would have loved to see him bring in a better quarterback. Payton Thorne definitely should improve. He wasn't that bad last year, but that's the problem. He wasn't that bad, which also means he wasn't that good. And if Auburn is going to look to make a big step forward year 2 under Hugh Freeze, they need more out of the quarterback position. So I had them a little bit slighted because of that, because the rest of the teams above them already have their quarterback situations pretty set, and they look really promising, better than Auburn's. And plus that offensive line, I still want to see how that's going to pan out. They got a deep wide receiver room. You have Ronaldo Fairweather, who transferred from FIU last year. He was one of their most reliable pass catchers on offense. So I am pretty high on Auburn. It's just that I can't put them any bit higher than 10 because the quarterbacks that are above them for the teams that I have ranked higher, they just simply are better. Tennessee starts the Nico Iamaleava era, and the potential is there. We saw what he did against Iowa in their bowl game. Iowa had one of the best defenses in college football, and regardless of how many opt-outs and starters that they didn't have playing that game, it still was impressive to see Nico put in work. But that's just one game. We need to see what he's going to do in these tough road games that Tennessee is going to have to play this year. How's he going to do on a week-to-week basis as the starter going up against the best competition in college football? And there were high expectations for Drew Allar last season at Penn State. And Drew Allar didn't necessarily disappoint, but he wasn't as good as what Penn State fans were hoping for. And maybe the same thing happens with Nico Iamaleava. Now, Nico Iamaleava could end up having a really good season. He could be a Heisman finalist, and Tennessee definitely could be contending for the conference title if that happens. But with how good this conference is, and with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas, I just think that it makes things a little bit difficult for Tennessee than what it was previously. They were a program that was on the rise, that was looking like they were becoming a national championship contender, but then last season was a down year, and even this year, they got a nice offense. Defense improved a lot last year, but I just don't see Tennessee better than Texas A&M, which is the big... I know that me having Texas A&M at number 8 is going to cause a lot of heated debate in the comment section, because you're going to say, oh, well, you got Texas A&M over Tennessee, and you're talking about Nico Iamaleava being unproven, but Mike Elko's unproven at Texas A&M, and that is true, but he's not unproven as a head coach. Mike Elko, his first season at Duke, he won 9 games. If you can win 9 games your first season at Duke, you can win anywhere. And it's not like Texas A&M had a transfer portal exodus when everybody just left when Jimbo Fisher got fired. There's still a lot of talent from the last couple of great recruiting classes still there. And they still have a top 10 roster in college football. When the team talent composite rankings get released in the next couple of months, I promise you Texas A&M is going to be in that top 10. Mike Elko has all the ingredients to cook up a special first season. They got a good offensive line. They're pretty decent defensively. They're just a decent team all the way across the board. And talent, from a talent standpoint, they're just better than Tennessee right now. Mike Elko, he should have that thing rolling. If he had a little bit more skin in the game and he had one season under his belt for A&M, if this was year 2, I would have A&M in my top 5, because I really believe that Mike Elko could have Texas A&M around 10, maybe 11 wins in just his first season at A&M. All they need is the right coach. The talent's there. They just need somebody who can maximize it. And Mike Elko is going to be that guy. Oklahoma, Missouri, I have them at 7 and 6. I was thinking about putting Oklahoma a tad bit lower, but I'm not going to do Brent Venables like that, because he did improve in year 2. A lot of Sooner fans think that I'm an OU hater. I'm not an OU hater. I'm just somebody who always is a little bit skeptical of Oklahoma every single year, because they do have a pretty good roster coming into the SEC. They have recruited pretty well the last couple of years. They've hit the transfer portal pretty hard. Brent Venables, though, my gripe with him is that he's a defensive-minded coach, and the defense hasn't looked elite under him. Last season, it looked good until they beat Texas. And then after they beat Texas, the defense just completely fell off a cliff. They nearly lost to the Gus Bus. They lost to Kansas. I mean, Oklahoma won 10 games last year. That was cool. But going into a tougher conference, I really don't know about Oklahoma. I really don't know. I don't think they're going to be a disaster, even though a 6-7 win season for them would be considered a disaster. But at the same time, the talent is there. I do have a lot of faith in Jackson Arnold. He had an up and down performance in the Alamo Bowl against Arizona, but the potential's there, and the defense did improve a little bit during the course of last season. But I think the jury's still out on Brent Venables. But at the same time, I still do have a little bit of faith in him. And they are trending towards the right direction. So I got them at 7. I fear this is pretty fair right now. Missouri returns the majority of last year's team, at least on offense. You're going to have Brady Cook back at quarterback again. Luther Burden, Theo Reese are the best duo in the SEC at receiver. You're going to have a really solid offensive line. You lose Cody Schrader, and the majority of your defense is going to be replaced, plus your defensive coordinator left for LSU. But with the majority of your offense intact, you should pick up from where you left off last year, especially if Brady Cook can slightly improve as a better thrower of the football. And there's a narrative about Missouri that last year was just lightning in a bottle, and this season they're going to come back down to earth. But if you take a look at what Missouri has done in the transfer portal and some of the big-time recruits that they've been able to get, I don't think that Eli Drinkwitz and Missouri were just a Cinderella story. I really believe that Missouri football is going to become a staple in the SEC. Are they going to be able to maybe win an SEC title in the future? Maybe so, maybe not. But if you think about how good Missouri used to be in the Big 12 and when they first entered the SEC, they've been to a SEC conference title game in the past. So it's not like Missouri just is one of those schools that doesn't have a tradition of having a pretty good football program. If you get the right coach in there who can maximize the resources, they could be a challenge. So I think that Missouri, in terms of the most underrated team in the SEC right now, they definitely fit that description. However, I can't give it to them. I got to give it to another team that is not LSU, but it's the next team after. LSU right now, I start them out at 5 only because, they really should be a little bit higher. But you have some big concerns about the defense. Yeah, you bring in Missouri's defensive coordinator, but we were pretty high on the last defensive coordinator that they had back there when he first got brought in by Brian Kelly. And you're just bringing in guys to continue to make the defense better through the transfer portal, but hopefully the defense improves. But I don't really know. Maybe defense just may be Brian Kelly's Achilles heel at LSU. But offensively, nobody really should be concerned about quarterback because they go from Jaden Daniels to Gunnar Nussmeier. And if you recall the 2022 SEC championship, when he came in replace of Jaden Daniels, he was destroying Georgia's defense. He was lighting that thing up. So I'm not worried about LSU's offense. We know that they're one of those receiver factories. It doesn't matter how many good receivers they lose. It's just rinse, wash, repeat. They lose a couple of talented guys. They get more talented guys. They lose them. And it's just a conveyor belt at receiver for them. Their offensive line should be the best that it's been under Brian Kelly since he got there. The offensive line has been a little bit of a work in progress for him his first couple of seasons in Baton Rouge, but I finally believe in his third season, he should have that offensive line playing as one of the best units in this conference. But that defense is what keeps them from being number 5 for me. Bama has to be number 4. And I know Kalen DeBoer is very new to the Southeastern Conference. He has a lot of pressure replacing the greatest coach of all time in Nick Saban. And he did lose a good amount of talent. Caleb Downs, is widely regarded as the most talented player in college football at his position. So to lose him was a big loss in Caden Proctor, but there still is a lot of talent on Alabama's roster. And you still do have Jalen Milroe. And we saw how good he looked at the tail end of last season. It seemed like the dude was getting better in every single game. Kalen DeBoer is one of the best offensive minds in college football. We saw what he did with Michael Penix the last 2 years. Imagine what he can do with Jalen Milroe, especially if he can help him progress as a better passer. Alabama, with the amount of talent that they've brought in via recruiting, still being intact, mostly. The transfer portal is going to open up. They're going to bring in some more guys. Kalen DeBoer is a stud head coach. He's a prodigy. And I don't think there was any better fit to replace Nick Saban but Kalen DeBoer. It's going to be the passing of the baton. And this is a bold prediction that I have, but I really believe, and I'm willing to put money that Kalen DeBoer wins at least 2 or 3 national championships as his time as head coach for Alabama. Like, this dude is a stud head coach. I'm not really worried about the whole transfer portal situation that Alabama had when they lost a good amount of talent, because a lot of teams were dealing with that. Georgia lost a few guys. Texas lost a few guys. That's just the state of college football. So Alabama, to me, still is going to be a factor for the conference championship. Shout out to my guy Vegas in the chat. Ole Miss is in at number 3. Is the Ole Miss hype for real? Are they actually going to be able to win the SEC this year? Because last year when we saw them against Alabama, they got boat raced. We saw what happened when they went on the road to play Georgia. That was another blowout loss that they suffered. But you look at what they have coming back this year. They're one of the better teams in the SEC when it comes to returning production. Jackson Dart returns for another year. He could be a Heisman contender this season. You lost Quinshon Judkins, but Useless should be pretty good, and he should be somebody who could break out this year, because I don't think that there was a big gap between him and Quinshon Judkins. I just think that Useless just didn't get the workload that Quinshon was getting. Quinshon did have a big part of the Ole Miss offense's success. He accounted for a lot of Ole Miss total yards in the productions that they had offensively, but their receiver room is so deep. Jackson Dart is really good, and the offensive line should be pretty good as well. Defensively, that's where we're going to figure out if Ole Miss is going to be a true contender in this conference or if they're going to be a pretender this year. Now, Coach Golding, when he was at Alabama, I wasn't the biggest fan of his defense. I felt like Alabama's defense regressed under Pete Golding. But last season, I cut him some slack just because, he just got there, and they brought in so much talent via the transfer portal. They had a damn defensive overhaul in the portal. They pretty much went out and spent all of their money on the best players available. So they pretty much got everything set. They got a good secondary on paper, a very good front seven that can get after the quarterback, stop the run. There's no reason why Pete Golding shouldn't be able to produce a top 50 defense for Ole Miss this year. And if he's able to do that, Ole Miss can win this conference. 1 and 2, Georgia and Texas. Georgia has Carson Beck coming back. They do return a lot of production on offense, and that defense is going to be really good. Texas, they pretty much buy their team, so they don't really have to worry too much about who they lose, because they can just easily replace them via recruiting, buying one of the top-ranked recruits, or you just buy one of the highest-rated players available at whatever position you need in the portal. Steve Sarkisian isn't a fraud. He is a really good coach. You think about how his time in Washington went, but he's reinvented himself. And last offseason around this time, we were all asking the question, was Texas actually going to be back? And they actually were. They won the Big 12. They made it to the college football semifinals. So Texas, them being at number 2, shouldn't really get any pushback. Everybody knows the talent they have. Steve Sarkisian has proven to be a really good coach. Is he an elite coach? I'm not going to give him that title yet. But Texas, and Georgia probably should be the SEC championship if I had to make a prediction right now for who's going to be in it. But these are my SEC pre-spring power rankings for 2024, ranking every team in the SEC, worst to best going in the spring camp. Give me your thoughts on who's too high, who's too low. I'm eager to hear your guys' responses.